The greatest enemy of happiness is not external situations or circumstances, but our own resistance to what is. When we try to push the river, we get wet. This is an ancient proverb that's been passed down for generations, and it means that when we fight against reality, we usually end up making things worse for ourselves. We get all upset, we get all frustrated, we blame others, and at the end of the day, we just make ourselves miserable. Now, this doesn't mean that we should accept everything that happens to us. There are times when we need to take action, when we need to stand up for ourselves and others, when we need to fight for what we believe in. But in general, the truth is that most of the things that happen to us are beyond our control. The best thing we can do is to accept them and move forward. When we resist reality, we suffer. When we accept reality, we have peace. The first step to being happy is accepting the situation we find ourselves in. Acceptance is the key to overcoming any challenge. It allows us to focus our energy on what we can control instead of what we can't, and it gives us the power to create the life we want. But why is acceptance so important? Why is it the first step to happiness? Well, let's take a look at what happens when we resist reality. When we don't accept the situation we're in, we start to feel negative emotions like anger, resentment, frustration, and sadness. These emotions are perfectly normal and understandable. After all, life isn't always easy, and sometimes things don't go our way. But the problem is when we hold on to these emotions for too long. When we refuse to let go of the past, we end up creating a lot of unnecessary suffering for ourselves. For example, let's say that you were recently fired from your job. Maybe you had worked there for many years, and then suddenly, without warning, you lost your source of income. In that moment, you might feel shocked, angry, scared, a whole roller coaster of emotions. And it's natural to feel that way. But what happens if you hold on to those emotions? What happens if you spend weeks or months blaming your boss, your co-workers, the company? Well, the answer is simple. You will continue to suffer. You will continue to feel stressed, anxious, depressed, and you will make it very difficult for yourself to find a new job. Why? Because when we hold on to negative emotions, we emit a negative energy, and people can sense that. Employers want to hire people who are positive and optimistic, not negative and bitter. So if you want to be happy, you need to learn how to let go of the past. You need to accept what has happened and move on. But how do we do that? Well, the first step is to become aware of our resistance. We need to realize that we are the ones holding on to negative emotions and beliefs. The second step is to question those beliefs. Are they really true? Are we really as bad as we think we are? The third step is to forgive. And no, forgiveness is not about condoning or excusing the behavior of others. It's about releasing the negative emotions we're holding on to. Finally, the fourth step is to choose to see the positive side of things. Every situation has both positive and negative aspects. We need to focus on the positive in order to move forward. So let's take a look at how each of these steps works in practice. Let's imagine that you've just received a cancer diagnosis. In that moment, you might feel scared, overwhelmed, desperate, and it's natural to feel that way. But what happens if you hold on to those emotions? What happens if you spend months or even years blaming the doctors, your family, your friends, even God? Well, the answer is simple. You will continue to suffer. You will continue to feel stressed, anxious, depressed, and you will make it very difficult for yourself to recover. Why? Because when we hold on to negative emotions, we emit a negative energy, and that energy will block the healing process. But if you follow the 4 steps we've talked about, things can be very different. First, become aware of your resistance. You need to realize that you are the one holding on to negative emotions and beliefs. Second, question those beliefs. Are they really true? Are you really as sick as you think you are? Third, forgive. No, forgiveness is not about condoning or excusing the behavior of others. It's about releasing the negative emotions you're holding on to. And finally, fourth, choose to see the positive side of things. Every situation has both positive and negative aspects. You need to focus on the positive in order to heal. You may not know this, but the human body cannot distinguish between a positive and a negative emotion. So if you choose to focus on the positive, your body will react accordingly. It will release feel-good hormones like endorphins, serotonin, and oxytocin, which will help you heal faster. On the other hand, if you focus on the negative, your body will release stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which will slow down the healing process. That's right. Your thoughts have a profound impact on your physical health. So if you want to get better, you need to learn how to control your mind. You need to accept what has happened and move on. Now, I know that this might be easier said than done, but it is possible. There are millions of people who have faced much more difficult situations than yours, and who have overcome them. If they can do it, so can you. Just remember to take it one day at a time. Don't try to rush the process. Be patient with yourself and trust that everything will work out for the best. Another thing that can help you accept what has happened is gratitude. When we focus on gratitude, we remind ourselves of all the good things we have in our lives. We remind ourselves of the people who love us, of the roof over our heads, of the food on our plates, and this helps us put things in perspective. It helps us realize that we are truly blessed. There are people who would love to be in your position, people who would kill to have the things that you have. So be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for every breath you take, for every step you make, for every moment you live. And this will help you accept what has happened and move forward. In addition to that, another thing that can help you accept what has happened is helping others. When we help others, we get perspective. We remind ourselves that there are people who are less fortunate than us, people who have much bigger problems to deal with. And this helps us put things in perspective. It helps us realize that our problems are not as big as we think they are. So whenever you have the chance to help someone, do it. Volunteer your time. Donate money to charity. And this will help you accept what has happened and move on. Finally, let me share with you a story that illustrates the importance of acceptance. A long time ago, in a faraway land, there was a king who had 2 sons. The eldest son was strong and brave, and the youngest son was weak and frail. The king loved both of his sons equally, but the people in the kingdom did not. They made fun of the youngest son and called him names like useless and worthless. The youngest son was very sad, but the king told him, "My son, you must learn to accept yourself just the way you are. You are perfect just the way you are." The youngest son didn't understand, but he promised his father that he would try. One day, the king went to visit a wise hermit and asked him how to help his youngest son. The hermit looked at the king and said, "Your Majesty, you cannot help your son. He must help himself. He must learn to accept himself just the way he is. He must learn to love himself." The king was surprised. He couldn't understand how his son could love himself when everyone else hated him. But the king respected the hermit's wisdom and decided to leave his son alone. Many years passed, and the eldest son became the king after their father's death. But the kingdom was in danger, and the king needed someone strong and brave to defend it. He asked his son, "My son, are you willing to defend our kingdom?" The eldest son was ready to go to war, but the king stopped him and said, "No, you are not going to fight this battle. Your brother must win this battle himself." The eldest son was furious. He asked, "Why does he get to do everything? I'm the one who deserves it." The king looked at his son and said, "You are strong and brave, yes, but your brother is something more. He is wise and humble. He is kind and compassionate. He is also brave in his own way. You may not see it, but he is. The eldest son did not understand, but he knew better than to argue with his father. So he left the kingdom in the hands of his brother and went to train an army. Meanwhile, the youngest son prepared to defend the kingdom. He assembled a team of advisors and diplomats. He reached out to neighboring kingdoms for help, and when the enemy arrived, he welcomed them with open arms. The youngest son's enemies were shocked. They expected to see a weak and frail boy, but instead, they saw a strong and confident leader. They tried to attack, but the youngest son's army was ready for them. And soon the enemy was defeated. The youngest son had won the battle, not because he was strong and brave, but because he was wise and humble. He had accepted himself just the way he was. And that's how we can find happiness, by accepting ourselves just the way we are. I hope this story has inspired you to accept yourself just the way you are. I hope you've realized that you don't need to change anything about yourself in order to be happy. You are perfect just the way you are. If you like this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I make videos that inspire people to be their best selves and live a life they're excited about. Thank you for watching and have a great day.